Echawi yoxatini, takat Johan. Kunachawi has to dart away utach watunk, a Ch'áagu ḵáax'u. A drecht to a sagui, satini aya yata. Yisakuge guchsa, ye has yeti, we at Yahai guchsa, Yisakuge. Sheetka. Sheetka, ye has yeti. We kuik plain yak guhichen. A joy a plain ch'u, yak e wutien. Ye awa kunach a datawe yutach watunk. Wasa atune. Wasa has to ch'a aya a kawaha. Ya Telushke yakusi. Wegal, gosh 1903, gosh 1902. Ilkden Hosaku. Wait a koa. Aka away, we Alaska, Anaski shut the honey. Brady, you do a sago, Governor Brady. Wishing get aya yo saka. Kayek, the cutwe kuig. Ketsuyak kuhig, ya ye anaka. De away, Ch'áax idat. Wasa hasu tu ni kwegao. Kuig aya konach a atinachayati yashingit. Ye away, hoach, wakasha de nakri. Du hunt hasua at. Hasakhewa woos. Yeshke wasak wati just kleich a wanyach, kleich a. Kuig klein. Aka ketsu yagachtu sahih. Ye awe Governor Brady ye aka just kleich a ka klehuj. Wasa adata we yutach the tongue. Wash atling ch'u tashas awas ka ada. Wasa atwuni wegao. Was dat yachsak kwati. Washya yidat. We Governor Dunleavy ye awaka. We kagach hiti tash asa adeka kwa art. Ye awe wasa hasu tuuka kwa nig. Ye awe ko hasu kusti. Ch'áagu ḵáax'u. Madre khanachwe khashatsini at. We kuketan kuigi. Sheet ka. Atlin ch'u aya adehasu ch'uatin. Ye awe kanachwe hasakawa ke hakusi ka hayukatangi hasawa shati. Kayatatsu. We ushkei shkun. Atunachaya hasayawa at. Hastu tu ǩáax'litzin. Ǩáax'u tu litzin. Ya hastu tlawut. Ajowe ya hayuqatangi. Qutzati Yesu. Ya atling ch'u we adatki qayanwadk we ga. Hasakaw akasawa shat aya hakusi kahayuqatangi. Ye aweshtiqa khatati tlachunach. Kallach tuashku aka hasak kuqaq. Wasa atwune. Litzin aya achtu wasaku adachwe utushati. Ya hastu kusti. Aadé aya ishan den hasakawa shuya. Aka awe kegurlitzin hayuqatangi. Kallach tuashku aqan den yetusni. Ya just tulla an qakusachantin kagachtu aq. Ya hayuqatangi. Kuchte yantutlaqi. Ya awe kulchisha qeitisa akhi. Yituagasagu yiqayatani helwasaka kwati. Aka gleitqaq inach wujinyuk agachtullaat. Ya yata widech ayahai ka harayejini.
You said something about the cuich, like a last cuich, and the way of life and the language.
Yeah, does anybody want to say anything and Tlingit first? Even just a few words here and there, like just try a few things, and then we'll switch to English. Okay. Okay.
Is Janae a possession verb?
It's a possess. So it's kind of complicated how verbs can become nouns. It's not always consistent. Yejene is the noun form of work. Yejene is also the third person, they are working, or they work. But then when you possess it, it becomes ha yejene, our work. Other thoughts? I was talking about the last ch'u. Yep.
Yeah, I was talking about in Sitka, Governor Brady was saying no more quick click. So you could have click on one more. You could have one more, and that's it. And then you mentioned Dunleavy. I don't know what that was about. Is that when I didn't catch that? But not familiar with the Dunleavy politics, but
It's a hate. You are fortunate. Yeah, so anybody else catch any of that stuff?
I heard something about a school that was like bad or something.
Yeah, bad school.
yeah, yeah.
Bad school.
Were you saying that
I think you mentioned that twice. Like, did you say the potlatch was bad, and then later the school was bad as well? I think I heard you say it twice
In this
early on.
said a bad thing came upon their lives.
Okay, right. Okay.
were you saying that they had strength? They had to have strength.
Yes. Yeah, they had courage and fortitude.
And about like saving the language or keeping the language through that or something.
Yeah. It's like I've been talking about this, I guess this week. So I did this thing. I was really looking for a program where I could just put like a whole bunch of pictures in a folder and it just randomly shows one. And that was very hard. That was a very hard thing to find. I did find it though. And so we were doing that, and it's really just all the images from the beginning Tlingit workbook. So in advanced Tlingit, we're putting those images up and us challenging everybody to just say things about it. Keep talking, keep talking. And so it's interesting because like here's an image that we've used to learn Tlingit, and then we see it, and then we're challenged to like say stuff about it, like more than just the name, right? And then this picture came up, and we were having a conversation, and there were people who were in Sitka, and this was taken in Sitka. And I just started thinking a lot about, so the stories I've heard around like the ch'u that the Ch'áax'u hosted there, that Governor Brady told the Tlingit peoples that the ch'u was going to be outlawed, and they'll never be able to do it again. And I think about like, one of the things I think about a lot is the fact that probably not a lot of people know that. Like, that's just not day-to-day conversation. And I bet you if I just, maybe, my guess is I could walk into like high schools and Alaska history and classes here at the university, maybe, and I would just say, hey, do y'all know this? Can you tell me why is this ch'u significant in this place right here? I don't know if they would know, like they would know that. And so I was just saying in Tlingit, like, I just think, what would it be like if the governor now, his name is Dunleavy, just proclaimed, nobody can go to a church anymore. All the churches are closing. The churches are all closing. And then all the leaders of the churches got together and just asked him if they could just please go to church one more time. And he said, okay, but it's the last one. Like, just, I don't even think like people can really fathom what that would be like, but that's what the Tlingit people lived through. So Governor Brady said, no, It's going to be outlawed. It's going to be banned. We're just done with this forever. And there was no intention of just saying like a temporary thing, right? Like the whole intention was to just completely make our way of life illegal. And the ch'u is such an important thing to Tlingit peoples. It's a part of the grief process. It's part of how we carry on our traditions, how we tell our stories. There's so much that goes into it. Names are given. And so the leaders got together and asked him if they could just have one more. And he said, okay, one more, and then that's all over. And so I think about that in a picture like this, to gather together and to as you're losing the land and you're just, everything's going out of control. They're just murdering your people and taking all kinds of stuff. And now they're coming for your whole way of life. And so I think about that, and I think it was generally okay to start having ch'u at some point. I don't know exactly when. It was really like the Native American Freedom of Religion Act was passed, I think, in like 1978. And so the fact that you needed a law like that in 1978 is pretty alarming. But then I think of like, when I look at this picture, like I think about the strength of all the people between that point and now who have held on to our culture, held on to our language. But I'm using this as like an image to think about both strength and determination and courage that these folks had, and that they were able to hold on to so much for us. But then also use it as a way to give ourselves room to make mistakes and room to grow and room to try, because we're reconstructing an awful lot of stuff right now because so much stuff was taken from our people. So then I also thought about this school and how the adults were going through this like elimination of our way of life, and then the children are being taken to these schools and being treated usually pretty horribly, and their names are taken, and their hair is cut, and all kinds of stuff is going on. But they too had incredible determination and courage to hold on to things. So I'm very grateful for all the things that were held on to. And what I was talking about is my hope is that we're not doing our work with anger. We're not doing things out of any sense of chush. Oh, what's it called? Ch'áagu, I think. It's revenge. What we're trying to do is like to work with love and kindness and to reconstruct this incredible way of communication and thinking about the world. So as we sort of start to wind down the semester, we want to make sure everyone's feeling like, okay, look at everything that Tlingit people have gone through. And then look at what you're doing, being part of an incredible reconstruction and a restitution of things that have happened to us. Even though there's not enough people who are footing the bill, right? And so I do think things are shifting, though, in a good direction with all three languages in Southeast Alaska. And we're on the cusp of like some really big moves, is what it feels like. And I think a lot of credit should be given to ancestors who went through a lot of terrible stuff. Thoughts, questions, reflections?
Is this also in
I was looking for a picture that you gave as an example of Ani, of a village, and I was looking around Google for it, and I found it was a New Tongass village in, I think it was 1897, 1895, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I found the article. It was from a Science Monthly article, and at the end of the article, it was basically just some white guys who came over and visited the village and like wrote down some things that they saw and stuff. But at the end of the article, they're like, "It's sad that another totem pole will never be made, and that another longhouse will never be made, and things like that." And I just think that we've Tlingit culture has revitalized and endured a lot more than most people thought it would like 100, 120 years ago.
Yeah, right. And what people thought was going to happen. And we were sort of on that track for quite a while. And there's lots of people who did incredible stuff to help prevent that from happening.
That picture of the kids at that school, is that Sheldon Jackson?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I've been there.
Oh, yeah.
Like that
building?
still exists.
Yeah, all those buildings are still there. It's really wild.
'Cause I went to Sitka Fine Arts Camp and I swear that's one of the buildings they had us staying in.
Yeah, and we've had immersions in some of those facilities, Mount Edgecombe and
Yeah.
Sheldon Jackson. Ch'áagu is the name of the place where that campus exists. We should call it Ch'áagu and not that person's name, because you could argue about that person's intentions, but you can't argue with the fact that he was a proponent of eliminating indigenous languages, so I cannot be a fan of that human being. But at least it's not on like a dollar bill or something, or the seal of the state of Alaska. It's probably hidden in there behind a tree, ready to get you. The seal of the state of Alaska should just be a saw. Sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering if is Gaetan the name for like that place before the campus was there, or is that the name for like the institution?
Yeah,
Or
that's
both?
the name. There was a village there, and it's called the
Oh.
village at the head of the bay. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
Is that what Aitan means?
So ta is the head of a bay.
Oh yeah.
So that's where like a name like Qanachtidi, that's where that name comes from. Qanacht I. Smush it together, you get Qanachtidi.
Like T.
T high tone A.
It's not pinched.
That'd be a king salmon. So this little lake on this side of us in the classroom is Ch'áagu. And then the bay over here is called Ch'áagu. So there's a new science building that's going to be called Ch'áagu, which is exciting. But we had to do, I guess 911 requires you to not use special characters. Get it together, 911. You're on Slinket Donnie, get a keyboard. But until they do, there'll be Ch'áagu in. And we'll just, I think like restoring place names is going to be really exciting. We're just going to have to give everyone lots of room to learn how to say these names.
Are they like refusing to put the Tlingit characters on the signs?
It's strictly for the 911, for them to be able to enter it into their system, which is probably it's probably a much, it doesn't have as many complex characters allowed.
911?
Yeah, so that if they could enter it into their system, which I don't know how it works, whether they type out, everybody go to this place.
Oh, okay.
But that way they won't all go to the lake because, But tell me it's not hard to find all the Mendenhall places in here. Right? There's at least 4 roads, I bet, that have Mendenhall names. Okay. Other thoughts, reflections, questions? General language stuff you've been thinking about. I know y'all are writing letters.
I've been thinking about what is it called? Like a particle? What would it be called? Like ch'a? Like what is ch'a as like a thing? Like I'm using it all the time when I'm working on this letter. Like ch'a isn't just like just and stuff like that. Like it's used in like so many different little phrases and such like.
Yeah, so ch'a is like just or the very, but it's usually not found on its own. It tends to pair up with other things a lot, which
I think you had a section of it in ḥáax'u ḥáax'u.
I think it's under particles. So there's this chapter here which looks at particles. And so when we say that word in Tlingit, particle, the way I think of it is like it's something that doesn't fully make sense to just look at on its own. Like look at how it combines with other things to create meaning. So for those like sa is probably gotta update this. Sa is actually the command form of a verb. It means name it. But here you've got ch'a. So here's a bunch of things. So ch'adasa, ch'adachasa, ch'awasa, ch'awakukesa, ch'awayatiasa, ch'awayatiyeksa, ch'aadusa, or ch'aasa, ch'aguksa, ch'achunsa, ch'achuninachsa, ch'akwatkinsa. All of those are doing a very similar thing, like whatever, whenever, however, those types of things. Just keep in mind when you say ch'awasa, you're usually saying, it's getting close to saying you're doing something carelessly. So ch'awasa does, I think, include some judgment. Because like, oh, they're really doing things ch'awasa. That doesn't mean they're doing a good job.
Doesn't mean you're doing it in that old way. I'm doing it in that old way.
But it could sometimes be judgment-free. Like if someone said, how do you want me to do this? You say ch'awasa anyway, right? But usually you attach that like ch'awasa itawasaku, however you want it to. Then we get a few different, like, so ch'aan is different than the others. So that means like it's a hard logical turn. So it's like nevertheless is how I would think of ch'aan. Like that's a really good English equivalent. The first time I think I really heard that one used in a sentence maybe was a sentence about Kunei, the chipmunk. And it was the cutest sentence perhaps ever made. It was something like Kach'agu genkoe hasujin, ch'aanoe haskutzeti, ajoe an hasacha. Which we should, I'll write it so that we can take a look at it. Let's see. So if I were to say, Kach'agu genk hasujin, how would I write that?
TL, high tone A,
We'll keep it low.
X,
Put on underline.
Chat, underline X, 18,
Kach'agu genk hasujin.
YEI.
G O U. I don't know.
Genk.
G-E-I tone.
G-I-N-K.
Yes.
Hasujin.
SH, high tone AS.
Well,
Do you?
J high tone I.
J-I
tone
tone.
I-N.
Yeah.
Kach'agu genk hasujin, ch'aan haskutzeti. I think it's actually ch'aan ch'ua. We'll say ch'aan ch'ua haskutzeti.
C-H or C-H?
C-H-A.A-A-N.
K-U.
Dot A-A.
Haskutzeti.
Yes.
T,
H-A-S.
K,
Underlined K-U-D-D-I-T-E-E.
Ajoe an hasacha.
A-C.
ACH,
Put a high tone on it.
High tone A-W. High tone E.
away, EA.
Oh, an hasatcha. There it is. Sorry. I'm surprised you guys didn't catch that.
What was the thing you said again?
An hasatcha.
AAN.
A-N. Plus H-A-S.
A-T.
A-T-K-A. I think there's a pinch on the K. Oh, just kidding.
Psych. See if you were listening. Okay. So what do we got here? Let's go. Like we sort of do these in chunks. So here's the first one. Oops. Kach yeku genk hastujin.
Something
Other hand, sorry.
and
Their hand, their,
Something their hand.
something their hand.
not clock.
Small. Yeku genk is for something to be small, a non-living thing to be small.
Clock.
So what does kach do?
Is that bad? Like negative?
Very.
Very.
Very small in the hand.
So this is
Hands
about
are very small.
this is kunei. So this is about the chipmunk. Ch'áagu haskudziti.
Is there a
Never.
letter in there that makes it in a
Nevertheless,
Hold on.
those people existed, or those. They,
Got one question in the room. Hold on.
Is there a classifier that makes that? Are there even any verbs in there? I don't know.
Yeku genk is a verb.
So does the classifier have a thing that gives the hand a tribute?
The what?
Gives the hand an attribute.
It's the end and
The
it.
hand.
Oh, okay. No, it's just saying. This is saying specifying what is small.
Oh,
So yeku genk means it is small.
okay.
But you could change the classifier to say they are small thing. You could say it is small. So that would be a small living thing. Yeksukenk kunei. Chipmunks are small. Or a chipmunk is small. It's a single one. Okay. Ch'áagu haskudziti.
nevertheless, what's ch'u again? They exist because.
They exist to eat.
Oh, to eat, right? Yeah.
What are we doing?
Nevertheless,
Achaway an hasatcha.
That land.
Is such a way can like kind of like so that or because of this?
because right.
Because
Our land?
Something must eat.
something they eat.
Oh. Wait. Did they eat the land?
What is the on part? It's not village, it's not land.
It's like, isn't it thing? Or, no.
So I don't know if we did this one or not. So maybe it's time to take it. We got to switch over to something real quick that I think we didn't make it all the way through. So switching to this will help us to see. But where is that thing? Okay. Have we talked about the empty base in here?
Empty base?
Oh, a little bit. We've talked about this.
Oh,
Yeah,
Ch'áagu
kind of
genk.
like a placeholder. So if there's something that has to have a relational thing, but there's no relational thing to put there, then you just plop a chair in there and you're like, boom, there it is.
Yeah. So you cannot put a suffix on a pronoun. And you also cannot put a suffix on somebody's name. So you can't say ḥ'nei or ḥ'nei. You can't do that. So what you end up with is sometimes an empty base. It doesn't mean anything. It really exists, so you could put a suffix on it. So when you see ach'i, i'i, du'i, ha'i, yi'i, hastu'i, ch'a'i, and then you could put a kinship, ish, itla'i, that's usually meaning whatever the suffix is going to be, and then that person. So for example, ach'ide, i'ide, du'ide, ha'ide, yi'ide, hastu'ide, ch'a'ide, ish'ide. Towards, right? And so there's a lot of verbs that would use this. Like you could say, I'm going to help you. You're going to help me, right? And so these are used in a lot of verbs that use indirect objects. So the object exists outside of the verb. And then the one, so we also hear like eat. So we say, eat yan uwaha. So we've probably learned that verb. Eat yatawaha. What do those two mean? Eat yan uwaha. I'm hungry.
I'm hungry. I'm sleepy.
I'm sleepy,
tired.
right? So it's literally like hunger has come to me. Sleep has come to me. Like that's like how the grammar works. So the same thing, you have ach eat, eat, do eat, ha eat, eat, has to eat, ḳáax'u, ish eat. Right? And so we also might know this one from ach eat dishi, help me. Right? That's a command. Or you could say, do eat chodishi, I help them. But if you look at ach eat, it can contract to chat. Right? So you just have to know this stuff and you get it from context. So if someone says, chat dishi, you're not like, the fish was what? You're like, no, they're commanding me to help them, right? Repeatedly, so these they'll change depending on the verb too. So some of them, a future is going to be day, perfective is going to be the T, and then it happens all the time. So you could say, ach tuyak e ach ich itishi. I'm happy you repeatedly help me. Right, so here you've got ich all the way down. You also have with. For with, you have achin or chan. Chan kananik. Tell me. Chan aadé, come with me over there. I'in, do'in, which can be doon. I've never seen it. Ha'in, yi'in, hasta'in, ḳáax'u can become q'un, which is where ch'u, it's ch'a'i can become ch'u, and a'in can become on, and does a lot. So that is the thing we're looking at with it. So going back to our little chipmunk thing, how does that affect this sentence now?
Because they eat with it. Probably with their hands.
Yes. Their hands are very small, nevertheless they exist because they eat with them. Their little teeny hands. It's such a cute sentence. I want to just pinch it, pinch. It was Ch'áagu, Sophie Smart, who came up with this sentence. It was a gem. I was just laughing really hard. So we were having a lot of fun. So this is how ch'áan works. And I know we had a question earlier about a furnace too, but just sort of looking at this, the other thing is ch'áani or ch'áaninach or ch'áanidach or ch'áanqunach. I've heard all three, I've heard all of those, which means I would say to do it nicely. And I first learned this one when, I can't remember the context, but there was a baby around. You know, sometimes if you have a really good dog, they just know they have to let the baby just pound on them and pull their ears, pull their hair. And so I was trying to like say to the kid, like, be nice to the dog. And I didn't, you could say tusha'an tin with kindness, but that's where this on comes from, is this is probably that verb root for kindness. Tusha'an and yaksa'an, ch'áaninach or ch'áanidach. And this one, in particular, is usually like an adverb, like it pops up right before the verb. Do it kindly, do it nicely. Then you got a whole bunch of other ones. Ch'áagu, ch'ut is pretty common, like different. Ch'áagu, 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 ch'áagu. Ch'áagu is a pretty important one. It means that one is really reckless. So ch'áwasa is pretty like careless, but ch'áagu is reckless. And let's see, ch'anaani. There's a couple that are pretty fun. Ch'áaqa means in vain. So you could say, for example, if I spent all day building a shed, then I got done, I felt pretty good, sat down with a cup of coffee, and the wind blew and my shed just fell over. And I would be like, ch'áaqa khwashayech. I built it for nothing. It just fell right over. And the meaning here is a swing. So it's like I pushed it out and it swung right back. The other one is ch'anich. They both mean the same thing, like for nothing. Ch'anich means like just on the beach, but it also means for nothing. Ch'áagu is used a lot. If you use ch'áagu, you need to put that verb in probably a habitual form. So instead of ch'áagu yeyati, it should be ch'áagu yenatich. But for now, you can usually go look up those habituals, or you'll be fine if you end up not using those. Ch'ayesu is like just now, and then ch'ayuk and ch'ayak is suddenly. So this list is there of these particles. Ch'u is kind of a similar thing where you don't really see it too much on its own. But this one has a few different, ch'a should be up here. Ch'a is forever. Ch'áagu is the same. Ch'u is both. And then we had a question about how would we say a furnace? I don't think I've heard a word for it, but I will, or like a heater, some sort of heater in a house.
Oh,
Go ahead.
no, that just,
Wasn't there something about throwing you alive into the furnace?
Yeah, but
I
it's like
think,
into the
I
flames.
think it said into the fire.
It's
Yeah.
literally into the fire, but it says into the furnace. And so we could say that, but I feel like we should be more specific. And so, there is fire. So there's a couple of verbs here that are pretty related. And you're going to run into this stuff in Tlingit quite a bit. So we're going to go down to, we'll just jump right to the verb roots. So there is this verb root gone, which is, if we look here, it's to burn, to scorch, cremate, shine a light, to be sunburned, for the sun to shine, for something to catch on fire, to light something, right? So all of these would be the gone verb. It has to do with burning, lighting something on fire, probably lighting something like a candle, for the sun to shine. Like all of those are gone types of things. That does not include burning skin, which we'll get to that. So there is gone for something to burn. And this is related to gun, like for firewood and for fire, right? There's a really interesting relationship between all of these things. But then there's also ch'a. So ch'a is another verb. And this one, it's a verb root, is to warm something up. So this is for something to be warm or hot. This is to warm something up. This is to comfort someone or to warm up a person. These ones are not related. These ripe ones, I think, is a different for something to be hot, warm, and hot weather, right? So that's something. So you could say, and something that we also figured out, like as we started using Tlingit quite a bit, those of us who were learning, and the speakers already knew this, was ch'u would be the weather is hot. Yit'a, ya'itika. This room would be yit'a. So you wouldn't have the ch'u on there because it's specifically talking about the weather. So there's another one here, which is ch'áagu, which is to radiate or to throw heat. So this is the one I would think of. But you could have something, so you could end up with one of two things. So you could say like something like hit ausatai, so it warms up the house. Or we can go up here to hot. And I think of this one, so the sun is heating, the open fire is throwing lots of heat. So I think we'd have something using this verb because it's like the heat radiates out from something. And so it could go, I'll talk to some speakers and see if they have suggestions on which one would work better.
Is that on there? I think is that fire.
Uh-huh.
That has a low tone mark does that mean that the tone actually shifts downward?
Yeah, so when you're reading this dictionary, when they mark it with a downward tone, you can just ignore it. That's just a long, low vowel. But in the 1970s, that's how they wrote them.
Why are some of them marked low and some of them not?
I don't really know. Like, I don't know what, maybe they were hearing it lower than others, or they were just maybe specifically, I'm not sure because, yeah, this is the exact same vowel as that one. But the other thing that they did in this is they marked, like this, ḳáax'u was sai. That's a short vowel. So sometimes they heard short vowels as long, and maybe they were trying to sort of mark something a little different here.
But it doesn't deliberately downshift the tone.
They're the same. They're the same. So just look at it when it's marked up. That's the only thing, that's what matters. So I would say, hit yich satachi, or something like that. It's something that radiates heat inside the house. I think that would probably take care of it. I just don't know how to get to the noun form of it, but I'll try and find out in the next couple days.
And sheesh.
Ah,
The other half of that question, if your furnace goes out, what's that verb? When I was putting together sentences, I used would-ik, but I'm not confident that that's the right one.
yeah, it's a ḳáax'u.
Okay.
So this is the verb, and this is both to put out and to go out, which is just kind of interesting. And so a ḳáax'u, so you would say, whatever we decide, whatever we end up landing on with that name, we hit ye sitachi, a ḳáax'u. And so if you're getting to a if or when statement, it might be a little complicated. And so you might end up just saying, guash. Well, in this case, if we want to say, when your stove goes out, you would say, istuhu akawushkisi. So that would be that or when. And that's going to be the easiest way to take care of that. So
And that is like specifically like if the pilot light went out, or is that just like the furnace is broken in any way?
That would just be going out. So you would just be saying like it stopped burning, whatever. That could be a fire, that could be a candle, that could be the furnace. But then I think you would end up with, hold on, let me stop this. You could go down to, probably, but see, you're not going to get to say it's broken. I don't think you would end up using this unless you're talking about some specific part inside that was physically like busted. But just to say, so what you could say is we had that verb for put out, which was to also go out. So we could say, so what I would end up probably saying, and especially the things that we're going to try and find ways to do is find the short way to get there usually. So this would be, if we use hit ye tachi, or we could just say we. And then this was a ḳáax'u. And then your next sentence might be guash su. And then what we'll go look up is to light. So then what I would probably do here, because like someone has to light that thing to get it going again, right? So once I see this, okay, so this is going to be, one is this shows in the perfective, a ḵáax'u. So I know enough about Tlingit verbs to be able to look at that and say that's a zero conjugation verb, which is helpful to be able to conjugate it in a future, which we'll learn how to do. Like this, it will make sense. So I would say ḳáax'u at kagach duch gang. So that's what I would end up doing. So like the furnace went out, maybe it's not going to get lit again. And so from there, that's saying, so you can, like, this is how I was using when I was talking about the ch'u. So I would say ḳáax'u it's not going to happen again. Right? So what you end up with is negative, again, future verb. Right? I'm not going to talk to you again. Right? Which is just an example. I'm not. But you could put verbs like, you know, ḳáax'u I'm not coming back here. Right? And so that's how you could do some of those things to talk about like, and then once you put guash in front of it, it's like maybe it's not going to light again. So now we're saying that it's not working, right? Which is, these are bad winter sentences. So I hope everybody's furnaces are okay. It's burning well.
Nilqasiat ch'áagu ch'áagu at ch'áagu ka'ach ka'kain kudas.
Nishan. Yeah, furnaces are very necessary things this time of year. Okay. 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 Okay.
I ran into kind of a similar problem as I was poking around in the verb dictionary trying to figure out what to look up to find what I was actually trying to say. It seems like, well, clearly the Tlingit dictionary is not nearly as robust as, say, a Spanish-English dictionary. In part because, well, the language was suppressed as we went through our kind of age of mechanization, so I don't know that there are words for some of these things. But that still leaves me kind of picking and trying to find out, how do I actually say this?
Yeah, and sometimes like you would just say it differently in Tlingit, and those are things that we learn as we, and so in your final with your letter writing, just keep the communications very easy. Don't move into like, let me tell you this one thing that I've always wanted to tell you. Like, just don't make it into these really big things. Like, they could be big emotionally, but if they're really big conceptually, like, you might be reaching too far and overdoing it on this assignment, which is, you know, but also have fun. Like, we'll figure out some things. Like, if we're not sure how to say it, like, send me a message or you can ask in class and we'll try and figure it out. Okay. Okay, let's take a break. Come back at 1:45. Okay, good cheese. So we had a few other things we were talking about over the break. And so one of them is for and from, which are, I think, are really interesting things in Tlingit. So we have really like yis and dach, which are kind of two different types of things. So yis is a relational noun. So it can stand on its own. It doesn't really take a suffix. So you can say iyis, right, for you. And it's usually for the benefit of someone. So this is like for the benefit or as a gift. So when you're using yes, that's what it's going to be for. So for example, I could say yes ye jikwane. So the context here could be if we both worked at the same place and you told me I'm getting sick. And I say yes ye jikwane. I'll go work for you. I'll do that work for you. Right? And then it gets a little different. So yes, and then you have jiyis. So when you put j on there, how do you think it's going to change?
That's the for your benefit one, right?
It's still the benefit. Because what you have here is G and yes combining. And so what is the G part?
Maybe
The
like
possessing.
possession, like
Possession.
present or something, gift.
Just for you to be yours, right?
So yes, for, to have. Right, so it's a little different than this, right? So this is really for the benefit of, or for, it's a little bit more of a straight like for, but this is like for to have. Like, so you could say, ijiyis káax'u. I am writing this, maybe painting, for you to have. So this, and so what kind of verb you can end up having here is usually making something, right? So I'm making this for you. You could also say, ijiyis ḳáax'u. Anybody know what that one would be? Ijiyis ḳáax'u. I'll buy it for you. And so G-yes is a little bit different than yes. It's like you're going to have it. Right? But this could also be like, this would work for like we're going for lunch and you say this to me. I'm just kidding. But this would be like, I'll pick up the check. G-yes ḳáax'u. I'll buy it for you. Right? And then there's a slightly different one, which would be kagei yes. And this one, I think when this one is being, it's like it's not really a thing that someone's going to have. It's like the way that I heard this is I first heard it from Nora Dowenhauer, and she said, "Ha-iti ḳáax'u kagei yes wuch in ye gach." So this is how she said it. And so I don't really know how to translate. I guess it's for the good of, maybe. I don't know. So ha'iti ḳáax'u kagei yes wujin yejegachtune. We are going to work together to benefit our future generations. So it's like it's like an improvement for them, maybe, or something like that. It's just something. But so like, this is how you would do like a for thing. Like I'm doing this for, and like this one would be like, there's a whole bunch of things. You could say, ach tla yes hundaka hitite ḳáax'u. I'm going to go to the store for my mom. Right? And so like basically what I'm saying is the things I'm going to get there, I'm going to give to her. Right? And so that's kind of how this one works. And then the from one is usually like, so you'd have this and jidach. So for example, you could do quite a bit without ever using a verb, which is always sometimes kind of nice, right? So I could say, this would be a whole sentence. And what is that saying?
I am doing for the benefit of my mother from what I have.
Close, yeah, but like, so the pronoun tells us who the thing is for. And then once we have the j on there, it's for them to have. And so like this one, like without a verb, because there's no verb there, I would end up with, this is for you from my mother. But it's a whole sentence, but that means that there's got to be some kind of object there that I'm handing to you, right? So without that object, it doesn't really make, like if I just called you on the phone and said that, you'd be like, what? What is it? I can't see it. Put me on the video call or whatever the thing is, right? But if I just gave you like this sweater, this is for you from my mother, right? Like you can communicate a lot of stuff right there without any verbs. But if you want to get into like making it, buying it, anything like that, then you have to add some verbs in there. Any other questions?
Can you go back up to the I'm writing this for you thing? For whatever reason, it just decided it didn't want me to edit my own document anymore.
Oh. It'd be a connection issue.
I think it's a browser issue because I switched to a different browser and it started working.
Okay. I'm happy to look at stuff if you want. It would be probably helpful to, there's two ways you could send it. You could send it with the Tlingit text here and then the English down here. That's kind of cool. But what might even be cooler is if there's a table menu and you can insert a table. And if you did it in a table with the Tlingit here and the English here, then it's easy for me to add what I'll do is I would add a third column over here where I would make suggestions. So I wouldn't be manipulating the things that you write, but I would sort of write some suggestions on the right-hand side. Okay. Okay. Have we looked at this one yet? Okay. So here's another way to look at the Tlingit verb. Just like to keep thinking about it as we start wandering towards our winter break. We got to have a lot of stuff to think of over the break as we give our minds a rest, but also if you're learning Tlingit, you can't take too long of a break. You just gotta like sit down and then get going. But as we think about this stuff, like a lot of the work that I've been doing over the past like 10 years teaching Tlingit has been just trying to demystify how a verb works and just say, yes, there's a lot there, but it's all predictable and it's a set of these things. I'm trying not to say just, but it's a set of these things that interact with each other. And we learn how those things work to start moving the verb around. Whether we're talking about for person, who's doing it, to whom, or we're talking about these modes. So Tlingit likes to work in modes instead of tenses because time is not the driving factor. What's usually the driving factor is completion. Did it happen? Did it not? So it could be like happening right now, but it hasn't been completed, those types of things. So thinking about the Tlingit verb, I like to use like these little illustrations. Ch'áagu, you're going to try, you're going to succeed. So we're our language is gaining strength, our brains are gaining strength, we're burning these whole new pathways in our mind. Because as we move from beginning learners to intermediate learners to advanced learners, we end up burning entire new pathways and building an entire new brain within our consciousness. Because you will reach a point where you're thinking in Tlingit. If you got to keep going. But one of the interesting parts, I think, of it is it's an act of decolonization, but that means the colonizing part of your brain, whether we want to admit it or not, there's an active colonizing part. Because if we speak English on a regular basis on indigenous lands, that's a contributing factor to the elimination of indigenous languages. It doesn't have to be, but until we can build a strong enough bilingual population, it kind of is. But that means there's this internalized process, I believe, where people are just right on the verge of becoming just full speakers of Tlingit, like where they can speak it, they can change the verbs, they can do all this stuff, but the English side holds them back. And what it usually ends up convincing them to do is start over. Let's just learn Tlingit all over again. Let's just start all over. Let's just go back to square one. Because I think what happens is your English brain starts to lose track of what's going on. It can't translate everything fast enough. And so what happens then is I think you begin to feel lost or behind, which I think are, for me, it's colonial trickery, trying to keep you from like really going full speed. So what we're doing is we're burning these pathways, we're building this second brain right next to our other brain. It's not going to gobble up the other brain. They can both exist. It's totally fine. Also, Pechne nor down Howard told us, you improve it by using Tlingit language. So whenever we come in and we talk more about verbs, I really recommend just go read a story. Go read a story in Tlingit. Go listen to the recording, read the story, read a speech, listen to the speech. But then as you like read it out loud and just don't think about the grammar. Don't even think about all the stuff, the moving pieces. Just read it out loud, the whole thing all the way through. But then go back in and start looking like, oh yeah, there's a classifier. There's the verb root. Oh, this looks like a perfective, right? You'll start to figure out a few more of these things and then that it will make sense. But I think once we do the grammar stuff, you should move into some sort of whole language stuff. Okay. Isatuutin. It was a fun phrase I learned from my uncle Yeshieti Nathan Jackson. We were in the carving shed and there was just like a quiet moment, so I just grabbed a broom and started sweeping up wood chips. Carvers make wood chips. And he said this is a phrase his uncle used to say to him, which is go by your own ambition. So don't wait for the moment to come, but be the moment. Because for Tlingit, it's usually not spoken, it's usually not heard. You're going to have to be one of the ones that speaks it. You're going to have to be one of the ones that's listening to it. So these are some color-coded things. Does anybody know what this green one is?
Is that the prefix?
That's the preverb.
All the preverb stuff.
Preverb stuff.
Big bucket full of stuff that can be empty or can have a lot of stuff in it.
That's right. What about the blue one?
Object? Maybe? No?
That is an object. It's an object pronoun. And what is the object generally?
Is it the purple one or the pink one?
It's the blue one.
Oh.
But what is an object in a verb?
What's getting verbed?
Yes, the one getting verbed. What's the pink one? Yeah.
Thematic or
Thematic.
thematic? Okay.
Which is also, it's a noun that you could put onto a verb. What's the gray one?
Conjugation, I think.
Right, so this is where you can move the verb into different modes. It's all going to happen right here. There might be something that pops up here. This is where most of the action takes place. The red,
Is that subject?
it's the
Subject.
red is the subject. Purple,
Classifier.
brown,
Root.
Root.
root, and
Suffix.
Oh, and the stem.
root and the stem. What's the difference between a root and a stem?
The root is like the long
underground.
and low, but the stem is how it changes. Oh, opposite.
Opposite. Well, that's the stem. The stem is the vowel. Is it going to be short and high, long and high, long and low? So what is the root?
The root is the pure version that we look up in the dictionary.
Yes, it's the meaning. To be, to see, to go, to, right? And so usually you're going to have some sort of root there, like ch'áagu. It means to go by boat or car, right? And what is this? Was that like mauve or something? Too many colors.
Suffix.
And the yellow.
Post verb.
Post verb. Okay, yes. In case you're interested in suggesting a new color scheme, don't. Right now, like rainbows would be cool, or maybe there's some other spectrum we can discover. But you know what? We're too far. Like, I've gone through a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm not trying to be mean, but here's the parts. Okay, so a few things. Like, so what is the prefix? The prefix is the object, thematic, conjugation, subject, classifier. Sometimes the object is actually in the preverb. Okay.
So is conjugation related to classifier?
The classifier and the conjugation will combine to put the verb into a different mode.
So they work together?
They do work together, but they're different.
For future verbs, it also seems like the conjugation feels more at the front. But I guess it combines with the object, but it feels like that's often.
Yeah, like everything is right there. So it's going to always come right in between the thematic and the subject. But if there's no thematic, then the object will certainly encounter it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so I would say an awful lot of verbs don't have thematic prefixes.
What is the difference from conjugation to classifier?
Yeah, okay, so the classifier, so here's the classifier. So the classifier, I think the most important thing to remember about the classifier is it's going to be a certain way. Like, so if it's a zero group, it's going to be a zero. If it's an S, it's going to be sa. If it's L, it's going to be sha. If it's SH, it's going to be sha. And I like to, someone made a really interesting observation a few years ago, that if you put your finger like right here on your body, like the base of your neck, that part is called sa. If you move up to your neck, that part is called ch'a. And if you move up to your head, that is sha. And then the other one, it doesn't. I guess you got to go way above your head, and there's nothing, right? So like this top left corner is that's the default mode of that classifier. So those classifiers are 0, sa, sha, and sha. They will go plus I for two things. One, to say the verb did happen. Two, to say the verb will potentially happen. Those are the only things. So there's a whole complicated set of verbs called potentials, which we'll learn later. Those are all plus I. All potentials are plus I, which violates the logic of Tlingit in a lot of ways. You'll figure that out later. But for now, all state verb imperfectives are plus I. Yak-a, shitzin, city.
What was the thing that plus I was again? The two things.
Plus I is, just for now, I would say, think of plus I as saying, yes, that verb happened. All positive perfectives, all state verb imperfectives will be plus I. Everything else is minus I, which is why these days I don't even mark it minus I. I just say, this is the classifier. You can add the letter I to it to say that it happened. Okay, just start with that. That's what the letter I does for now. It just says that that verb happened.
Does that work for all four types?
Yep. Every single one of them. It's a constant through. So that's one of the main, so the main functions I think of the classifier are to change agency, to say it's not just good, yake. You made it good. Yishike. It's not just sick, yanik. Somebody got me sick. Ch'áax'u. The other thing is it can go plus D, and plus D is usually showing that there's middle voice there, which means the subject is also the object. I saw myself, ch'áax'u, right? And we'll deal with middle voice in a little bit. But the conjugation is more like the perfective marker, the irialis, the conjugation prefixes. And we will talk about what those do, but we'll probably have to hold that for next semester. For now, I think when you're writing your letter, use a lot of verbs where you can just look them up. That's going to be really helpful for now. Okay. So here's these things, right? And what we're going to focus on, we're shifting our focus when we talk about verbs to how do these things work? How do they affect each other, right? Because step one is learning how they work and how to use them. You could start changing the object. You can start changing the subject. Who, verbs, whom. And then the other thing is you can start changing the conjugation. Move it into a perfective, move it into a future. But then you're going to have to figure out like what kinds of things get activated and what happens when they start running into each other. But once you do that, you've got it. You can build prefixes once you can do those things, okay? So going through, again, looking at how do we read a verb. So now, I think a couple years ago, a friend of mine suggested, why don't you color code all of the verbs that are in the new dictionary? So if you found like a version of that dictionary from a few years ago, it would look different than it does now. And over winter break, I think there's going to be a new edition that comes out. It's got a bunch of new words in it. But for example, in this dictionary, if you go down to the verbs, so this first section is tlingit, but it's really everything in the language that's not a verb. Then you go down here, and this is the verbs. So if you start looking through it, the preverb is green, the object is blue, subject is red, classifier is purple, and the verb root is brown. So it's matching this color scheme that we're using. And if you go through, I think this is going to help to see, like, so this one, you can change the object and the subject, right? We'll go down to ch'an, because I think it's one of the easier verbs to look at. So when we look at ch'an, the love verb, got it. So right here, object, subject, S classifier, ch'an. It's a state verb, so in the perfective we should have si, ch'an. So if we go up here, we'll see asechan. And what we can learn is sechan is going to stay the same. So now you can have ich sechan, chatesechan, chasechan, isechan, and we could start changing the object and the subject within this verb. Dasa?
Does perfective mean like it's over with, like it's happened?
So imperfective means it hasn't been completed yet. That's the big thing imperfective means. It means it is now, but it hasn't reached a state of completion. Perfective means let's talk about it in terms of whether or not it has happened. Okay.
And the plus and minus, is that like, I noticed it has like klech at the bottom. Is that like the negative form or the positive form?
Yes, klesh is not. So it will always push the verb into a negative form. So then you'll say, asechan, they love them. Klesh uschan, they don't love them. Ausechan, klesh awuschan. So here, perfective plus means it happened. Perfective minus means it didn't happen.
Does it imply like they love them but not anymore? Because that also is like this, whatever, I can't recall it.
It depends on the verb, because it could mean they came to love them. When we're talking about the moment when they became to love, but you can also have, like you could take this, you can cut this klesh off, and you could say awuschanin. That would be they used to love them, but they don't now.
Right.
And you could say klesh awuschanin. They used to not love them, but they love them now. So you can do these sort of, do sort of a double negative with that, which is, there's a suffix there which is called decessive. Like we've learned that, but not as a chunk of grammar. We've learned how to say you do sagen. They used to be called that, but not anymore. Okay. Okay. Where did it go? So when we're coming and looking at these things, again, like what are these things so I can start to learn how to use them and change them. So in the preverb, if you have something in parentheses, that means it's either optional or it's there, but it can be replaced by other things. So in this case, you could say yeyati, right? So you could say, yeah, it is that way. Or you could say kasiyeyati. It's strange. So you can substitute something else in there to say, what is it being, right? Then you're going to have the object. So in this case, this is going to be what is being that way. So when you say yeyati, it is that way. Yechatyati, yeiyati, yeyati, yehayati, yeiyati, yehasyati, yeqayati, right? And the classifier, again, coming back to what this thing does, it could change the agency. I could say someone's doing this thing, someone's making it that way, someone's making it good. It could classify, so you could say, oh, let's switch it to the S classifier. It's not just being, it's being one of these things, right? Like it is ḥáax'u, it is tlingit, it is a teacher. It can show that it's reflexive. I'm doing this to myself. We're doing this to each other. And it can also change for transitivity, right? To say we're not just doing it to someone. Okay, and we'll look at a bunch of examples of how this works. But basically, if you change classifier groups, you're usually changing what the verb does. You're either specifying something, saying someone is doing it to someone else, or something like that. Then we have the verb root, which contains meaning. Then we have the stem variation, which is marked in a number of different ways. It could be this little letter H. it could be a little X, it could be a high tone mark right here. Those are the three main ways that we mark stem variation. So basically, if you see a high tone on the theme, so this is called a theme when you put the verb like this. If you see a high tone, it's not gonna go low. If you see an H, that means it's gonna do everything you expect, but when it goes into a repetitive mode, it's going to stay low. If you see a little X, that means it won't change. Like ch'an, it just stays short and high every time. Then you also have sometimes a little number 1 or a little number 2 after it. That tells you that there's a homonym. There's T, which is to be. There's T, which is to handle a general or compact object. There's T, which is to imitate, right? So you'll just see that there's a set of those, and it's a different, if it says T3, that's a different one than to be. Then the theme is going to show you the conjugation type or the conjugation class. It's going to be 0, na, ga, or qa. That means in some of the verb modes, that thing is going to pop up right here. For example, if I wanted to tell someone to be that way, I would say, that's funky looking text. Hold on. I don't want to take a picture. Okay. So I would say ye inati. So this would be the command form to be that way. And what we see is this na popping up right here, which we could make gray if we want to, and this can be blue if we wanted it to sort of match our, to show like this is the object, this is the conjugation, this is the root, the class. What's going on with the classifier in this case? Anybody know? It's a 0.
It's being invisible.
Yeah, right, it's a 0. So ye inati is a command form for be that way, right? So this shows us, in other cases, we could say ye natich. It is always that way. So here again, the na is popping up, and then you're also getting a suffix on there. And this is the habitual suffix to always be that way, or to always verb. So these are ways what this informs that. And you will learn how to move those verbs into those different modes by looking at this thing and looking at all the information it gives you, and then learning basically what is the prefix going to be like and what is the stem variation going to be. That's how you build verbs. That's how you conjugate verbs in your brain. It's by it's sort of a 2-part process. This is what the prefix should be, and the stem is going to be this. And the stem is determined by some different factors. 1 is the conjugation type. 2, oops, there goes the thumbs up. 2 is the verb mode. And then 3 is the stem variation that's built into the stem itself.
So the gray one that says na is a conjugation?
That's a conjugation prefix, right? And it's here as well.
So is there an example? Because like hun, like love, is a state verb as well. Can you write down something that has na in it? With hun, or is there one? I just can't think of one.
So yeah, well, let's go look up this. Let's look up this verb. So we'll go to the verb database. So in the verb database, which I need to move over here. So we're going to close this. So to see this stuff in action, we're going to go down to ch'an. And here it is. So object, subject, S classifier, ch'an, it doesn't change. It's short and high. G, state. So then the G pops up in the command form. Gasachan, love them. Gaisachan, you all love them. But then if we go through, we don't see it here, we don't see it here, we don't see it here, we don't see it here. We see it in the hortative. Gachsechan, let them love them. You see it. This is, so when we talked about potentials earlier, they get long and complicated. Kesh aadé aguchsechani ye. There's no way they could love them. You'll also see the g popping up in conditional. This is the g when you pull the vowel out. When you pull the vowel out of g, it turns into a k. Aksachani, if or when they love them. And so that's.
So it's a gus state verb. Okay, I'm just trying to it's a gus state verb rather than as T is a nas state verb.
Right.
Okay, that's what I was just thinking in my mind. How do if I spot a na, does that mean it's a state verb? Yeah, but there's also a gus state verb. So there's just, I'm just trying to get it in my head. Yeah.
I think almost all of the state verbs are g. Like if we look up chitzin, right? That's a state verb, to be strong. So we'll go look it up. And so here's to be strong, to be powerful. Object, L classifier, seen. This one also does not change. It likes to stay long and low. So if we open it up, we see ikchatzin. That's the command form. It's a bit unusual because you have I, ga, sha. So here's the thing. If we sort of look at this, we'll type it in our notes here. So in our notes, what we have here is we have I, ga, sha, sin. Right, so this is, we're doing a command form. The command form requires that this ga be activated. Whatever the conjugation prefix is, needs to be activated in the command form. But Tlingit also has this rule. Richard Dowenhauer called it the 3 strikes and you're out rule. If you have 3 things in the prefix that have a vowel, one of them should be contracting. And when we look at it, you cannot drop any vowels from I because it's only a vowel. So then the next thing to go is going to be this. So if you drop this vowel, and so to signal vowel dropping, we're going to change it to red. So what you end up with is I, K, ch'a, sin, which gives you ikchatzin. But like, as a language learner, if you were to look that up, and the use of this would be like you're telling someone to be physically strong. Like if they're trying to like lift something, and I guess instead of helping them, you decide to just give them a motivational speech. Ikchatzin, right? Be strong. And so, but maybe they're lifting weights or something, and their goal is to get tough, right? But that's how you'd say it. But as I think, if you're just trying to memorize the language, you would have no idea why there's a K there. If you like start to get the mechanics of the language, you say, oh yeah, that's a g conjugation verb. That g needs to be activated, but there's 3 things there, so something has to contract, right? And your brain will be able to process all of this stuff. And like, I'll show you one more verb that's g conjugation that we probably all know this verb, right? So, and
we should find a way to mark the G that it's changing to a K. You don't have enough colors yet. You should find another color for that.
Like maybe some kind of orange color or something.
Maybe I was thinking maybe like a neon green.
Oh, a neon green. Okay. Okay.
I don't think you have that one yet.
There are still a couple hundred colors to choose from. Okay, we're running out of time. I'll show you one more verb. So if you have a zero classifier, it's a little bit easier to see some of these things because now you don't have an extra sound in there. So if we go to being, so here's our verb for good. We learn this verb as ch'áax'u. But as we get into like more advanced verb work, we say, oh yeah, that has an object. It's a zero classifier. Ch'áax'u, it likes to stay high, and it's a state verb. Like these are just things we need to like put into our brains. But the way that it makes sense is we say, well, how does that affect it? Ch'áax'u, be good, right? And then you can go down and say, oh, there's also this hortative thing, right? Like let them be good. Ch'áax'u. And we're going to learn how to put a hortative together. And then we're going to learn that it's also in the habitual form. Ch'áax'u. Ch'áax'u. I am always good, right? And so we will learn how, but the steps that I'm going to propose is we look at some that are imperfective that we could just remember what that verb is, right? Sechan, we're going to do a lot with that verb because it's easy. It doesn't change a whole lot. Then we're going to start looking at how to build perfectives so that we can look at any verb in here. You should be able to take a look at any verb. Like we'll just go to G. And you should be able to look at this information and say, oh, the perfective for this is going to be ye-hua-ji. It's going to go underline X, W, A, J, high tone, long E. And we should be able to predict that. We don't have to open it up. But when we do open it up, we'll see I was wrong on the tongue. Okay, sorry.
It's a ch'áax'u, the conjugation.
Hua is the prefix. The conjugation that's in there is y, which is the perfective marker. So what you have here is 0, y, ch, ya, which becomes hua.
Okay, so the quick answer, what's the difference between the nut and the ga? Because like I know to be, it's not really specifying anything. It's not specifying to be strong, to be tired, to be happy, to be kind. Is that why it's a na? Because you have to throw it in there, it just means to be.
They do have meaning associated with them. So when you look at 0, usually means there's some sort of ending to it. There's a goal to be achieved. Na means there's not a specified ending. It doesn't mean it never ends. It just means it's all about the thing going rather than reaching a goal. Ga is upwards, qa is downward. So they do have meaning built into them, but they're not always, sometimes they're going to make sense. Like you could say ǩáax'u, go up. And you could say ḳáax'u, go down. Like you can say those things. Like if we're sitting there and there were stairs going up and stairs going down, I could say one of those things and you'd know which way to go. Others, it doesn't always, like, I don't know why state verbs are upward things, but most of them are. I guess you got to get up to that state of being. And some of them, like if you want to tell someone, when you say ch'u ye iqwasatin, it's because it's qa conjugation. So beholding something is a downward sort of thing, which I don't know why it is, but it just is.
Is the ch'áax'u the ch'ua from the other thing, where it has like a thing that combines to become that thing?
Yeah, so what I'll do is, so what you're having here is you're having perfective marker plus ch'a plus ya, getting you hua. Like every time you're going to have hua because you have these things. But if you change the classifier, like for ḥáax'u, now you're going to have hwasa. But this is where it becomes predictable. This will be the last thing we do. If that's an L classifier, then that's the single letter that changes. If that's an SH classifier, that's the single sound that changes. Hwase, hwashe, hwashe. And you can also have hwadze, hwadle, hwadje, where that is the single thing that's changing, is this consonant right there. So then you end up with this sort of pattern that you're going to see in Tlingit, which is 0 and everything else. And we'll look at those patterns, like especially next semester. We're going to try and balance using the language and getting deeper and deeper into this stuff, so that because I think it's so abstract if you don't keep speaking and reading and listening to the language. But I think learning this stuff unlocks it so that you can look up a verb theme and now you say, I can use that verb any way I want to. You'll get there, because then you're just at this point where you're gobbling up verbs, gobble, gobble, gobble. Yay. But I still think that there were ancestors a long time ago who just met in the woods, and they're like, how can we make this whole thing just so much harder? I know, but it's so wild too, because I would talk to speakers and they just know how to do this stuff. They could just do all these amazing things with the language stuff.
How can we keep our language safe from outsiders? By making it as complicated as possible.
Yeah, like someone
Yeah.
was mad at me because I was posting a recording of a speaker who told a story that he wanted to share with people. And I said, well, just don't translate it. And it's like, that's full encryption. That's uncrackable. Well, I guess someone could study it for years so they could decode it. But now we got him. So
What was were they mad about?
it was like a sacred story, I guess. There's a lot of hardcore stuff in that story, maybe.
Like, what were they mad about?
The fact that it was online for people to see.
Top notch.
I don't understand the reasoning behind it.
That's weird.
Okay. Be brave. You got it. We'll get it together.
Ch'áax'u.
Sheesh.
Oh, sheesh.
What